There are places we are told not to go. Not because they're lost. Not because they're dangerous. But because someone, somewhere, decided the public should never see them. They exist on maps you're not allowed to follow. Hidden behind guarded gates. Beneath cathedrals, pyramids, jungles, and ice. Some hold tombs that were sealed and forgotten. Others hide doors that have never been opened. And a few, they vanished entirely, swallowed by earth, ocean, or silence. These aren't just restricted zones. They're places built to keep secrets. And the closer you get, the more reality feels like a story we were never meant to hear. Tonight, we step quietly through these forbidden walls. And we listen to what history tried to bury, to what the world still hides, to the spaces no one wants you to remember. So let your eyes rest, let your mind wander, and let the mysteries unfold, one forbidden place at a time. The temple that can't be found. Beneath the holiest church on earth lies a silence no prayer can reach. Not a myth, not a tale. Something real and buried. Welcome to Eternal Secrets, where history hides what it cannot explain. They call it the Vatican Necropolis, a city for the dead, an underground maze older than memory. But what lies beneath St. Peter's Basilica feels older than Rome, older than names carved in marble, older than the church itself. The public tours only skim the surface. A brief walk, a guided path, nothing more. But the real mysteries? They live deeper, down corridors that curve into nowhere, behind walls that feel warm to the touch. It begins with a door, unlabeled, ignored by maps. They say only a few are allowed to pass through it. Even fewer return with words. Inside, silence. Not the silence of death, the silence of waiting. One chamber is carved with impossible geometry. Its angles too perfect, its ceiling too high for the tools of the time. In the center, a block, not carved, formed, smooth as glass, but cold like the earth. When a scholar once tapped it, it didn't thud, tring, like metal, like memory, like something that wasn't supposed to be touched. Granite doesn't sing, and yet, this did. Alive. They brought scanners. The block was hollow. Inside, nothing, just space. Silence in its purest form. The room swallowed sound, but the block gave it back. Echoed, amplified. One witness said, it felt like the room had a voice, but the box was the only one allowed to speak. There were no hieroglyphs, no Latin, no Greek, no words, just something older than words. The church calls it sacred, a resting place, a holy site, but those who've stood there say it feels different, like a place built not for worship, but for watching, or warning. Deeper still, a painted chamber, now sealed, but once open for only hours before it was closed forever. On its walls, no saints, no crosses, no halos, just symbols. A serpent wrapped around a broken pillar, a faceless man standing beneath a burning circle, and around them eyes, hundreds of eyes, drawn without faces, watching. The room was declared inappropriate, unfit for pilgrims, too pagan, too strange. It was locked, painted over, buried again, and now, no photos, no trace, only a rumor that something was found that could not be explained, that should not have been seen. Scholars debated it, the church ignored it, and still the room waits. One corridor beneath the necropolis curves south, but ends at a wall that sounds hollow when tapped. Some believe a hidden chamber lies beyond. Others say it's just a flaw in the design. But in a place built with such precision, there are no accidents. And what about the energy? Visitors speak of a sensation, like static in the chest, pressure behind the eyes. Some say they felt watched. Others pulled. A presence. Not threatening, but ancient. Tired. A few fell ill. One fainted. He said later, I saw a room that wasn't there. The Vatican never commented. To this day, the site remains tightly controlled. Tours are limited. Time restricted. Access denied to certain corridors without explanation. But why protect stone? Why fear echoes? Why seal a room and erase its contents? Unless what lies beneath isn't just old, but alive in some way we don't understand. Perhaps it's a memory, or a machine, or a message that's been waiting longer than we've been listening. So the next time you walk the halls of a grand cathedral, close your eyes, feel the weight beneath your feet, and remember, below the stone, below the altar, lies a place that should not exist, a temple that refuses to tell its story. It was not built for the living, not built for prayer, not even built to be found, only remembered, only wondered, only felt when the world above goes quiet. The pyramid buried inside another. Not all pyramids were built to be admired. Some were meant to be misunderstood. Rising in the desert of Dashur, the bent pyramid stands like a question half-answered. Its sharp lower slope climbs with purpose, then suddenly changes its mind, softening halfway to the top, as if it remembered something or decided to hide. But this isn't a mistake in design. It's a mask, because beneath this strange exterior lies something older and far more perfect. A hidden pyramid. Inside another. Before the bent pyramid ever bent, it stood as something simpler, smaller, more precise. The base foundation, the earliest core, was a sealed internal structure, complete with chambers and tunnels that served no purpose for the visible monument above. Two entrances cut into opposite faces of the pyramid. The northern one, known to tourists. The western one, rarely mentioned. Both lead downward, steep and narrow, like veins funneling breath into the heart of a sleeping giant. And yet they don't meet. Each tunnel ends in its own chamber. The northern passage brings you to a stone-lined room with corbelled ceilings stacked to prevent collapse. The western passage curves into a chamber deeper underground, where the temperature holds steady, too steady, and the silence is absolute. Here lies the mystery. No hieroglyphs. No sarcophagus. No mummy. No royal seal. Just a block. Massive. Polished. Weighing over 45 tons, lifted into place somehow without modern cranes or ancient ramps. A ceiling made of a single stone, resting above nothing. The acoustics of the chamber are sharp. Any sound bounces oddly, echoing back as if filtered through time. Some describe the feeling of pressure in the ears, like being underwater or inside something alive. For years, scholars called the pyramid a failed experiment, a structural miscalculation that forced the change in slope. But others aren't convinced. They ask, if this was a failure, why finish it so carefully? Why polish the stone? Why bury one pyramid inside another? Some believe the inner structure came first, a forgotten project, later hidden by what we now see above ground. A disguise, not an error. If that's true, then the outer shell, the bent pyramid, was never meant to stand alone. It was built to protect something, or to erase it. Inside the hidden core, the walls are too smooth for the tools known to the time. Not chiseled, but sanded, melted, almost like the stone remembered a different kind of heat. Some researchers suggest the pyramid served more than a burial function, that it was a resonant chamber, a vessel for sound or vibration. A tool, not a tomb. When sound is produced inside the lower chamber, subtle frequencies ripple through the walls. Not echoes, tones. Controlled, focused, as if the very stone was singing back. Could this be accidental? Or was the pyramid designed to harness sound, to carry voices, or something else, across time? The bent pyramid is also the only one of its kind that still contains most of its original casing stones. Smooth, white limestone that once made the pyramid shine in the desert sun like a beacon. And yet, no inscriptions. No cartouches. No names. Pharaoh Sneferu is credited as the builder. But inside, no sign of him. No statue. No title. Nothing to claim authorship. It's as if the builders didn't want to be remembered. Or weren't allowed to be. And what of the western chamber? When radar scans passed through the pyramid decades ago, strange anomalies were detected near the lower passage. Empty spaces. Unmarked. Unreachable. One theory says there's another chamber never opened. Not by tourists. Not by archaeologists. Not by time. Perhaps that chamber holds the truth. Or perhaps it's already empty, like a vault that served its purpose and closed itself forever. And the most haunting theory? That the inner pyramid, the one buried inside, came from another time. Not just earlier in Egypt's history, but long before Egypt itself. Inherited, repurposed, wrapped in a new skin so future eyes would never guess what lay beneath. If so, the bent pyramid may be the clearest example of something ancient Egypt didn't build, but protected. But what could be so important, or so dangerous, that it had to be hidden inside a monument meant to mislead? We may never know. But one thing is certain. The pyramid we see isn't the one that matters. It's the one we don't see. The one buried inside. The one still listening. The monument that points to nowhere. In a quiet field once hidden in plain sight, stood a monument that refused to explain itself. It had no past, no origin story, and no clear reason to exist. Yet, for over 4 decades, the Georgia Guidestones cast long shadows over the red clay of Elbert County. Massive slabs of granite arranged like a modern Stonehenge, but colder, sharper, built not to honor the dead, but to guide the future. They called it the American Stonehenge. But this was no ancient relic. It appeared in 1980, commissioned by a man using a false name. R.C. Christian. No one ever learned who he was. He left behind no trail, just instructions, and a monument that seemed to point somewhere, yet nowhere. 4 towering granite panels, each over 16 feet tall, arranged around a central pillar. On those stones, 10 guides were etched in 8 modern languages: English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, Chinese, Russian, and above them, a message in 4 dead languages: Babylonian cuneiform, Sanskrit, Egyptian hieroglyphs, Classical Greek. The very top stone aligned with celestial events. A slot carved to track the sun. A hole drilled to point at the North Star. Precision like this wasn't decorative. It was intentional. But the real mystery wasn't the architecture. It was the message. The first guideline? Maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. That's over 90% fewer people than the world population today. Was it a warning? Or a blueprint? Other inscriptions encouraged wisdom, unity, reason, but always with the unsettling tone of someone trying to reshape the world, not preserve it. For some, it was a prophecy. For others, a threat. A call to order from a voice no one could trace. The guide stones became a magnet for conspiracy, curiosity, and quiet fear. Some believed they were placed by secret societies. Others claimed alien involvement. There were even whispers that they served as a signal, not to people, but to something else. But the deeper mystery was this. They pointed nowhere. The monument didn't honor a person. It didn't mark a grave. It didn't reference a single event in history. It stood alone, silent, unlinked to any known tradition, religion, or culture. The guide stones weren't rooted in time. They were placed above it. When journalists tried to investigate their origin, they hit walls. The granite company that built them was sworn to secrecy. The land was bought in trust. No records of R.C. Christian's identity were ever found. He left only one clue: a book, privately printed, cryptic, scattered with references to Malthusian theory, New Age philosophy, and a belief in reason as the world's savior. In July 2022, the monument was attacked. A bomb destroyed one of the slabs. And just like that, the state decided to tear the rest down. Gone. Without ceremony. Without explanation. Some say the destruction was symbolic. Others say it was silencing. Because here's the question no one could ever answer. Why place a mysterious monument in rural Georgia? Align it with the stars? Etch it with global instructions? Then never claim it? Unless it wasn't meant for us. Unless it was meant to wait. To stand long after cities fell. After governments collapsed. After language changed. A message in stone. For those who'd forgotten everything. But now it's gone. Or is it? Because the foundation still rests in the soil. The slab that tracked the sun's movement? Still aligned. And the name of the builder? Still unknown. The guide stones may have vanished, but their message didn't. It lives in photos, in records, in memory, and in questions that refuse to fade. Was it a warning? A plan? A signal? Or simply a test? To see who would notice? So the next time you walk through an empty field and feel something watching, remember, some monuments don't point to a place. They point to a time, a future, a silence that hasn't arrived yet. Maybe that's where we're headed. The pillar that was moved without tools. In the high plains of Lebanon, where the winds sweep over broken columns and forgotten temples, lies one of the world's most unsettling riddles carved in stone. At Baalbek, ancient ruins stretch across the hillside, arches, courtyards, stairs leading nowhere. But what truly defies logic sits beneath the temple of Jupiter. 3 stones, colossal, each over 800 tons, laid side by side, perfectly aligned. No gaps, no wobble, no explanation. They are called the trilithon, and no one can agree how they got there. Each stone is the size of a train car, longer than a city bus, heavier than a fully loaded Boeing 747, and they rest on a foundation already stacked with other megalithic blocks. This isn't just heavy construction. This is precision on a scale that shouldn't have existed, not 2,000 years ago, because there were no cranes, no steel machines, no diesel engines or hydraulic lifts. The only things available to the builders were ropes, wooden sleds, and willpower. And yet somehow, these stones were moved uphill, lifted, aligned, placed. No one alive today can replicate it, not without massive industrial equipment. But the mystery doesn't end there. A short distance from the temple lies another megalith. Still in the quarry. Still untouched. It weighs over 1,000 tons. Known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, it rests on its side, half-carved, as if whoever attempted it gave up. Or maybe they never meant to finish. Some believe it was abandoned due to a flaw in the rock. Others suggest something else. That the quarry and the temple weren't from the same time. That the stones already existed long before Rome ever reached these lands. Because here's the twist. Historians credit the Romans for Baalbek's grandeur. They built the visible temples, the ornate columns, the sculptures. But those megaliths? They don't match Roman style. Or Roman tools. They look older, more raw, more permanent, as if the Romans discovered Baalbek and simply built on top of it. If that's true, then who placed the trilithon, and how? One theory suggests the builders used earth ramps, miles long, just to drag the stones uphill. But the terrain doesn't support it. There's no room, no evidence. Another theory proposes sound, acoustic levitation, that the stones were moved not by force, but by frequency. It sounds like fantasy, until you consider the myths of ancient priests using chanting to lift objects, or Tibetan monks aligning stones with horns and gongs. No proof, but maybe that's because we've stopped listening. Baalbek's oldest layers are barely studied. Most focus has gone to the Roman temples above. Yet engineers who visit the trilithon leave with more questions than answers. Not just how the stones were moved, but what? Why build with such impossible materials? Why go through the effort of transporting them when smaller stones would do? Plus, the size was the point. Unless these stones weren't just structural, they were symbolic, or worse, functional. Some believe the platforms served as an energy device, a conductor, a stabilizer. After all, the stones sit in one of the most seismically active regions in the area. And yet the trilithon hasn't shifted in thousands of years. Maybe this was the only way to build something that wouldn't fall. Or maybe they were anchoring something. Legends say Baalbek was the landing place of giants, of sky people, of watchers who descended and taught mankind the secrets of stone and sky. In Hebrew tradition, the site was known as the City of the Sun. In Arabic lore, it was the domain of Nimrod, the mighty hunter who sought to reach heaven. But stories aside, the stones remain, quiet, unyielding, heavy in more ways than one. The truth is, no tool we know, ancient or modern, explains how they were moved. No record tells us why they were placed. And no civilization today can say with certainty who carved them. So we're left with this. 3 stones, stacked on the hill, pointing to a past that doesn't fit the present. Maybe they weren't moved with tools. Maybe they weren't moved at all. Maybe the land was shaped around them. Or gravity forgot them. But most of all, maybe they were never meant to be explained. Just to remind us that something once walked the earth that could do what we no longer can. The twin that disappeared. In a silent quarry in southern Egypt lies a monument that was never raised. A massive stone, lying flat, partially carved, perfect on one side, untouched on the other. It is known as the unfinished obelisk. And while it never stood, it tells a louder story than any that were ever erected. If completed, this obelisk would have been the largest ever constructed by human hands, nearly 140 feet tall, weighing over 1,000 tons, twice the size of any known standing obelisk in the world. But halfway through its birth, the rock cracked, and the workers vanished. Just like that, the project was abandoned. But here's where the mystery begins. Because the tools scattered near the site? They're primitive. Bronze chisels, rough hammer marks, scratches in the surface. And yet, the cut is clean. The angle's perfect. The symmetry almost mathematical. How does something so refined come from such simple tools? Even more bizarre, where is its twin? Most obelisks were built in pairs. One left, one right. A perfect balance outside temples and tombs. But this one never had a match on site. Yet in another city, far to the north, stands an obelisk almost identical in design. Some say it came from this quarry. Some say it was its sibling. But what if the twin didn't disappear? What if it was taken? Because many of Egypt's greatest obelisks no longer live in Egypt. They're scattered around the world. Paris, London, New York, each transported in ancient or modern times, with great effort, from the banks of the Nile to far-off capitals. But here's the thing. No one knows exactly how these obelisks were moved in antiquity. There are theories, barges, sleds, manpower, but none of them account for the size, the weight, the precision. The unfinished obelisk in Aswan reveals a problem. The tools we see don't match the outcome. The granite is among the hardest stones on Earth. Bronze couldn't shape it. Not efficiently. Not cleanly. So what carved the lines so straight? What sliced the trench so deep? And why begin a monument this massive, only to abandon it at the first crack? Or maybe it wasn't the first. Maybe something else caused the project to stop. Something sudden. Something hidden. Was it sabotage? A political shift? A forgotten disaster? We'll never know. But here's a deeper question. Why attempt something so impossible in the first place? The ancient Egyptians believed obelisks connected earth to sky. A bridge between the mortal and divine. Every obelisk was aligned. Every symbol carved to harmonize with the sun. Some were tipped with gold to catch the morning light. Others were placed where shadows pointed to sacred sites. They weren't just monuments. They were machines. Of meaning. Of measurement. Maybe of energy. And if that's true, then maybe this obelisk was stopped for a reason. A flaw in the rock? Or a flaw in the plan? Its twin, if it exists, may still be buried. Or standing where no one knows its name. Because here's the part most people forget. We only know of this obelisk because it cracked. Because it failed. If it had been completed and moved, it would blend in with the rest. Admired, photographed, misunderstood. But because it lies here, silent, immobile, we see its story. A story of ambition, of limits reached, and of something that might have been. So when people speak of obelisks as mere stone spires, remind them of the one that never stood, the one that tells us what could not be done, and hints at how little we truly know. Because sometimes the greatest mysteries aren't in what was finished. They're in what was left behind. A twin that disappeared, a plan that cracked, and a monument that whispers louder than any that stands. The language etched by no known hand. Tucked away in the eucalyptus forests of Australia, far from the deserts of Egypt or the cathedrals of Europe, sits a sandstone wall, etched with symbols no one can explain. Locals call it the Gosford glyphs. But to those who've seen it, it's something else entirely. 2 stone walls, forming a narrow alley, carved with dozens of symbols. Not graffiti, not animal tracks, but writing. And not just any writing. Hieroglyphs. Egyptian it seems. Or something eerily close to it. How did it get here? Who carved it? And more importantly, some say it's a modern hoax. That a bored researcher or eccentric traveler etched the symbols as a joke. But that theory falls apart under scrutiny. Because the carvings aren't random. They follow a pattern. A structure. They resemble funerary scripts, the kind buried deep in Egyptian tombs. And here's where it gets stranger. The language carved into the stone uses a form of hieroglyphics not even fully understood when these symbols first surfaced. It includes signs that weren't published until decades after the wall was found. So how could a forger know what hadn't yet been discovered? Even more puzzling, the weathering. The glyphs are faded, smoothed by time and rain. Not freshly cut. Not sharp. They've been here a while. But Australia was never home to Egyptian culture. At least, not officially. And yet, the stories persist. Of ancient ships reaching these shores long before European explorers. Of trade routes lost to time. Of maps that show lands no one should have known existed. Local Aboriginal lore speaks of star people. Of visitors from across the water. Of knowledge passed down, then hidden. Is it possible that Egyptian travelers reached the southern hemisphere? That they left more than stories behind? If so, this site may be the most damning evidence of all. The layout of the glyphs resembles a tomb. One wall tells of a journey, the other, the death. The translation, controversial but compelling, describes 2 Egyptian princes, stranded after their shipwrecked vessel washed ashore. One died. The other tried to carve his tale into the stone before vanishing himself. It sounds like fantasy, but then again, history has gaps. We assume what we've been told is complete. That civilizations stayed where they were born. That oceans were impassable. That Egypt was Egypt, and Australia, just wilderness. But the Gosford glyphs challenge all of that. They're real. Then our timelines are broken. Maps from our understanding of ancient navigation? Shattered. And here's the quietest truth. No official excavation has ever been allowed. The site is protected, but not studied. Scholars call it fake without ever touching the stones. Because if it's real, everything changes. And institutions don't like change. There's one more wrinkle. The surrounding terrain holds strange patterns. Geometric alignments in the forest. Unexplained stone arrangements. Markings in trees. As if someone or something tried to encode more than just language. A trail. A warning. A message. Some believe the glyphs are part of a global puzzle. Pieces scattered across continents. Speaking of a forgotten age when sea travel wasn't a dream, but a reality. When knowledge moved faster than empires. And symbols were etched not for glory, but remembrance. But the truth remains hidden, buried in bureaucracy and disbelief. No university wants to risk its reputation. No government wants to explain it. So the glyphs remain. In a forest. On a wall. Etched by hands we don't recognize. In a language that shouldn't be there. Telling a story that doesn't fit our world. And that's what makes it powerful. Because if even part of it is true, then the world is far older, far stranger, and far more connected than we've ever imagined. So if you ever walk among those trees, and run your fingers across the worn sandstone, know that you're touching something rare. A forgotten sentence in the book of humanity. A language carved by no known hand. And a mystery still waiting to be heard. The needle that bled light. In the ancient city of Heliopolis, where the sun once ruled more than the sky, stands a solitary monument. Silent, sharp as a needle, and glowing, once, with something more than sunlight. They call it the obelisk of Senusridai. Today, it rises alone in a quiet courtyard. But long ago, it pierced the heavens from the center of a living temple, a place built not of stone and shadow, but of light itself. This obelisk is the oldest standing in all of Egypt. Still vertical, still defiant, still aligned. But what it once did, that's the mystery. Because ancient texts speak of a phenomenon, a moment, when the obelisk would shimmer at sunrise. Not just reflect the light, but bleed it. A beam. Narrow, pure, falling across the temple's floor like a blade. Cutting across the sacred path toward the altar, only on one day each year. At the solstice, a moment of cosmic balance, where light and shadow held hands for a breath in time. No one knows how they calculated it. No computers. No satellites. Just intuition, observation, and something else. Something lost. And here's where it deepens. Because the obelisk's granite surface is embedded with traces of electrum. A naturally occurring mix of gold and silver. Highly reflective. Highly conductive. Why embed that into stone? Some say it was to amplify the light. Others believe it was to conduct energy. Not metaphorical, but real. Like a needle channeling something into the sky. And then there's the shape. Obelisks are not random. Four sides tapering to a point. A shape designed to draw in and project out. Some say they mimic lightning rods. Others say tuning forks. Or antennae. But whatever the truth, one thing is certain. This monument is not just beautiful. It is functional. Aligned to celestial bodies. Positioned with precision. Engineered with intent. In ancient Heliopolis, this was the city of the sun. A sacred center where the solar god Ra was worshipped. The obelisk was his needle, a marker of divine presence. But what if it was more? Some theorists believe this obelisk, and others like it, were part of an ancient network. A grid of monuments across Egypt and beyond, all resonating with frequencies tied to solar and planetary movement. Energy not drawn from wires, but from the earth, from the sky, from the geometry of the universe itself. It sounds like science fiction, but there's something here we still don't understand. Because the obelisk of Senusridai has endured for nearly 4,000 years, untouched by earthquakes, unaffected by storms, still standing when entire cities have turned to dust. But what holds it so firmly in place? What design makes it so resilient? Modern engineers have studied its foundation. It rests in a precise socket carved to the obelisk's base, balanced perfectly, without mortar, without reinforcement, gravity alone. And yet it doesn't shift, doesn't tilt. It simply is like a pin stuck into the fabric of time. And here's the quiet thought. Maybe it's still doing something. Even now. Maybe that beam of light wasn't just symbolism. Maybe it marked something deeper. The pulse. A signal. A moment where ancient knowledge touched the edge of science and let go. Because that's the true enigma of the needle that bled light. It wasn't just about worship. It wasn't just about beauty. It was about understanding, of time, of space, a balance. We call it an obelisk, but maybe it's more than a monument. Maybe it's a question, etched in stone, pointing skyward, waiting for someone to ask it properly. And until we do, it stands alone, glowing only in memory, a needle that once bled light. And maybe this still does. The obelisk that was too perfect. In the heart of ancient Thebes, modern-day Luxor, rises a monument so flawless, it forces even skeptics to pause. This is the obelisk of Hatshepsut, a 97-foot needle of pink granite, rising from the sacred grounds of Karnak Temple. So smooth, so symmetrical, it defies the very tools said to have made it. Carved from a single stone, weighing over 300 tons. Polished so precisely, it reflects the desert sun like a mirror. And here's what makes it stranger. It was created over 3,400 years ago. Without steel. Without diamond drills. Without anything we'd consider modern. And yet, every angle is true. Every line is sharp. Every face is so flat, you can align a laser against it. It is too perfect. But that's not the only anomaly. Because according to inscriptions, this obelisk was carved, transported, and erected in just 7 months. 7. By today's standards, that would be ambitious. By ancient standards, it borders on impossible. We're told that thousands of workers shaped it using copper chisels, that they dragged it across the desert using ropes and manpower, that it was raised using sand ramps and levers. But let's pause for a moment. Granite is one of the hardest stones on Earth. Copper is soft. It dulls. It bends. Try carving your countertop with a copper spoon. Now imagine doing that across 100 feet of stone, flawlessly in under a year. Something doesn't add up. And there's more. Engineers studying the obelisk have found no major tool marks. No evidence of crude chiseling. No layered carving stages. Just smooth surfaces, even symmetry, and perfect alignment. And when they analyzed the balance, they found something even more perplexing. The obelisk's center of mass was calculated to the inch. Not roughly, not intuitively, but with engineering precision, as if those who built it knew physics, knew gravity, knew harmonic balance. But this was 1450 BC. No schools, no calculus, no equations on parchment, only intention and something more. And then there's the location. The obelisk of Hatshepsut wasn't placed randomly. It sits at a specific point in Karnak, where it catches the morning light on the day of the solstice. A beam of sun travels across its face. It's a wall, illuminates a hidden chamber. A celestial clock, made of stone. Coincidence? Maybe. But if it were the only one, maybe. Except it's not. Other obelisks across Egypt, in Luxor, Aswan, Giza, all show similar alignments. Patterns in the chaos. Design in what should be randomness. And that's why this obelisk matters. Because it wasn't just a symbol of power, or a tribute to a pharaoh. It was something more. A tool. A signal. A message carved into the earth. A monument so perfect, it breaks the illusion that ancient meant primitive. So what's the explanation? Some say lost technology. Machines buried by time. Knowledge that slipped through the cracks of history. Others whisper of foreign help. Travelers from beyond. Gifting methods no one remembers. But perhaps the truth is even simpler. And more humbling, that the ancients knew things we don't. That their tools weren't just physical, they were mental, spiritual, geometric. That perfection wasn't just a goal, it was a necessity. And that when they built something to last, they made sure it would, for thousands of years. So today, when tourists stand beneath the obelisk of Hatshepsut, they marvel at the size, the elegance, the symmetry, but they rarely ask the deeper question. How did they do it? Why did they do it? And what did it mean to them? Because when you build something that perfect, you're not just making a monument. You're telling the future. We were here. We knew more than you think. And we left behind a mystery you're not ready to solve. So the next time you see an obelisk, look past the shape. Listen to what it's not saying. Because the ones that stand too perfect might be the ones trying hardest to speak. The shadow beneath the granite. In southern Egypt, near the banks of the Nile, lies a scar in the earth. It doesn't look like a monument. There's no platform, no inscriptions, no towering height. But it is, in every way, a mystery carved in stone. This is the unfinished obelisk of Aswan, a colossal block of pink granite, lying flat in the quarry where it was born. nearly 140 feet long, over 1,100 tons. If completed, it would have been the largest obelisk ever raised. But it wasn't, correct? And so they stopped, walked away, left it there, half-carved, half-reed, a monument not to success, but to a question. Because how exactly were they planning to move it? Theories abound. Wooden sleds, wet sand, ropes and labor, but none account for the size, the weight, the precision. And here's where it turns strange. Look closer at the quarry floor, at the narrow trenches carved around the obelisk's base. They're clean, even, consistent, as if dug not by hands, but by something with intent, something sharp, something steady. Modern archaeologists say the tool marks suggest dolerite pounding stones, rounded rocks used to hammer the granite. But pounding stones don't leave clean walls. They leave chaos, chips, not these grooves. Some believe ancient engineers knew how to soften stone, to treat granite like clay, temporarily, just long enough to shape it. A lost method, unrecorded, unexplained. Others think it wasn't abandoned because it cracked. They think it cracked because they hit something they weren't supposed to. A fracture, not in the stone, but in history. Because underground scans reveal something odd beneath the quarry. A cavity, unmapped, a hollow, just beneath the unfinished monument. Not natural, not explained. Some call it a chamber, others, a void. A space that may have been intentionally avoided, or hidden. So here's the thought. What if the obelisk was never meant to stand? What if it was meant to cover? To conceal something below? A seal, not a monument. A story buried, not told. And that's why some whisper about the shadow beneath the granite. Because what if this wasn't just an unfinished obelisk, but an interrupted one? Stopped not by fracture, but by decision. A deliberate silence. The area around the unfinished obelisk holds more questions. Granite blocks half-carved, tool marks that seem to vanish mid-swing, and walls that still echo with strange acoustics. Yes, acoustics. Because when sound passes through this quarry, it shifts. It bounces oddly, as if the granite remembers vibrations, or still carries them. Could the quarry itself have been more than just a workshop? Could it have been a kind of instrument? An amplifier? A chamber of resonance? It's a strange idea, but not new. Ancient Egyptian texts speak of sound as a shaping force, not just in music, but in matter. Some believed you could cut stone with vibration, move weight with harmony, control gravity with pitch. Impossible? Maybe. But then, what do we say about a civilization that placed 1,000-ton blocks? Without cranes or concrete? This obelisk is more than a failed attempt. It's a glimpse into a process we don't understand. And more curiously, one they never repeated. No other obelisk of this size was attempted again. But was this their limit? Or their warning? Perhaps they realized something, midway through, that made them stop. Something beneath. Something within. Or maybe the obelisk itself responded, cracking not from stress, but from resistance. Like a note that goes wrong. A vibration too strong. And so it lies there. Not broken, but unfinished. Not abandoned, but watching. Waiting for someone to see past its size, and into its silence. Because in that silence, there may still be a shadow. One shaped not by tools, but by intention. And until we listen differently, it will remain what it is. A monument to the edge of our understanding. A question carved in stone. Unanswered. Unyielding. The shadow beneath the granite. The city that followed its obelisk. Some monuments are moved for power. Some for beauty. And some carry more than stone when they travel. In the heart of Paris stands a 75-foot obelisk, tapered to the sky, etched with ancient Egyptian symbols, and tipped in modern gold. Tourists call it the Luxor obelisk. But it wasn't born here. It was taken from the sands of Egypt, from the temple of Luxor, where its twin still remains. This obelisk is over 3,000 years old, carved during the reign of Pharaoh Ramses II. It once marked the gateway to a temple of cosmic alignment, where shadows, sun, and stone worked in harmony. It was more than a pillar. It was a symbol of life's rhythm. And then, in 1833, it was uprooted, gifted to France. Placed in the center of Place de la Concorde, a symbol of progress, power, and pride. But something strange followed, because after the obelisk arrived in Paris, the city changed. Architects redesigned roads to spiral outward from it. Public spaces formed around it. Energy seemed to flow through it, as if Paris began to grow around the obelisk, as if the stone wasn't the guest, but the host. Look at old maps. Compare the layout of Luxor Temple to central Paris. Lines emerge. Axes align. Geometry repeats. Coincidence? Possibly. But perhaps something else. Because this wasn't just architecture. This was mimicry. A city echoing the blueprint of another, following the whisper of a stone that had already seen empires rise and fall. And the obelisk? It remained silent, but not still. People reported strange things. Compass needles twitching, timepieces losing sync near its base. Even a faint hum, low, deep, rhythmic, emanating during certain solstice sunsets. Unexplained? Maybe. But what if this obelisk wasn't meant to be moved? What if its original placement was part of a larger design? One connected to earth energy, to celestial patterns, to something we've forgotten how to read. In Luxor, its twin still stands, rooted in the temple grounds. Still aligned with the stars. Still silent, but not alone. Together, these two obelisks may have once formed a kind of balance. A tuning fork across the continents. And when one was removed, that balance was disturbed. Paris gained its monument, but lost something else. Because ancient builders didn't place these stones randomly. They were positioned with intention. Mathematically, spiritually, they connected the land to the sky, the people to the divine, the now to the timeless. And when you lift one out of its setting, you change more than scenery. You change the story. So, the City of Light holds a shadow of ancient memory. An obelisk that doesn't quite belong, yet seems perfectly placed. And the city continues to build around it, as if drawn by something unseen. Maybe that's the power of these stones. Not in their weight, but in what they remember. In the symbols they carry, the resonance they emit, the way they anchor meaning into the ground. Because a city that follows its obelisk isn't just rearranging streets, it's rearranging consciousness. So when you stand in Place de la Concorde, look not just at the monuments, look at the pattern, the geometry. And remember, the obelisk didn't come to Paris. Paris came to the obelisk that survived fire. In the heart of Istanbul, amid traffic and noise, where modern life dances over ancient foundations, stands a silent survivor, the obelisk of Theodosius. It rests in the hippodrome of Constantinople, but its story doesn't begin there. It began in Egypt, at the Temple of Karnak, carved more than 3,000 years ago. For Pharaoh Thutmose III, it once touched the desert sky, bathed in sacred light, standing as a beacon of the divine. But centuries passed, empires shifted, and one day, the Roman Emperor Theodosius wanted it moved. So in the 4th century, they cut it down, dragged it across land and sea, all the way to Constantinople. Many monuments never survive that kind of journey. This one did. And then, it faced something else. Fire. More than once, this obelisk has been threatened by flames. The fires of rebellion. The fires of war. The fires of loss. Blazes consumed buildings around it. Structures fell. Foundations crumbled. But the obelisk? It remained. The flames licked its sides, but the granite never cracked. The gold-tipped inscriptions never faded. Even when the hippodrome itself turned to ruin, this obelisk stood untouched, not blackened, not scorched, as if fire refused to touch it. And people noticed. In Ottoman times, scribes wrote of the stone's resistance to heat, calling it a divine relic. They said the obelisk carried memory, that it could not be broken by men nor burned by the earth. Legends grew. Whispers spread. Some believed the obelisk was protected by spirits. Others claimed it was a relic of ancient technology, an object that absorbed energy, but did not release it. There's something strange about its base. Unlike most Egyptian obelisks, this one sits on a Roman pedestal, carved centuries after the original stone. The pedestal shows scenes of Theodosius receiving tribute, lifting his hand as crowds bow in worship. But the stone beneath that pedestal? It's older, heavier, quiet, as if the base boasts, but the obelisk remembers. And then there's the fracture. The obelisk is broken, not in half, but shortened. Some say it cracked during transport. Others believe it was intentionally cut to hide something, because no one has found the missing piece. If it cracked, the top should exist somewhere. But it doesn't. No museum. No record. No mention. It's as if the piece vanished. And some believe that piece, that pointed cap, held a secret, a crystal, a device, a resonance chamber, a component too dangerous to display, or too powerful to destroy. So it was hidden, removed, forgotten, but the rest remains. Today, tourists pass it by. They take selfies. They read the plaque. Then they move on. Few notice the details. The carvings, worn but still sharp. The lines, etched not with primitive tools, but with precision, like laser cuts in stone. Granite this hard shouldn't be carved that cleanly. Not without machines. Not without something more. And perhaps that's the true fire this obelisk survived. Not just the flames of buildings, but the fire of time. The slow burn of history. The erosion of truth. Because while cities collapsed, and rulers fell, and books turned to ash, the obelisk stood, watching, listening, waiting, for what, maybe for us to notice, to look past the pedestal, to ask deeper questions. Why was it moved? Why did it survive? And what was lost when the top disappeared? Some say the obelisk absorbs intention, that its survival isn't luck, but purpose, that it was built not just to remember gods, but to preserve something older than civilization. A frequency, the code, a whisper in stone, and that whisper still hums, even beneath centuries of noise. If you visit at dawn, when the crowds are gone, you might hear it, the soft pulse of silence, the memory of fire, and a presence that says, I'm still here. You don't understand me, but you will, because truth doesn't burn, and mystery never fades. The one that sank then returned. Some monuments vanish quietly, others return when no one expects them. In the heart of London, near the River Thames, stands an obelisk, a towering column of red granite, etched with hieroglyphs, worn by wind, time, and, strangely, they call it Cleopatra's Needle. But Cleopatra never saw it. It was already ancient when she ruled Egypt, carved over 3,500 years ago. During the reign of Pharaoh Thutmose III, this obelisk once stood proudly in Heliopolis, a city of light, learning, and celestial alignment. Then, centuries later, it was moved to Alexandria, where it stood outside the Caesareum, a temple built by Cleopatra in honor of Julius Caesar. And there it stood until the earth moved beneath it. Storms battered the coast. Salt crept into its base. And eventually it fell. Into the sand. Into the tide. Into silence. For nearly 2,000 years, the obelisk lay buried. Not under sand alone, but seawater. Salt crusted its surface. Barnacles took hold. The sea forgot it was stone. And the world forgot it existed. Until the 1800s, the British, hungry for symbols of empire, set their sights on this ancient relic. They didn't find it standing tall. They found it sunken, half submerged, as if the earth itself had tried to keep it hidden. But still they pulled it out, hauled it onto a specially built ship, and set sail. The voyage was cursed from the start. Storms pounded the vessel. Waves snapped cables. Men died. One sailor's final words were reportedly, "The sea doesn't want it to leave." They were forced to abandon the ship. The obelisk, lashed inside a giant iron cylinder, drifted alone. And yet, it did not sink. Days later, the cylinder was found, battered, but intact, like the obelisk inside, had refused to drown. When it arrived in London, they called it a triumph, a symbol of civilization, a prize of empire. But the obelisk didn't celebrate. It stood silent, darkened by salt, its inscriptions barely legible under the gray English sky. The granite had changed, seaward, but not broken. And then came the questions. Why did it sink? Why didn't it shatter? Granite is brittle, but this stone didn't crack. Even after centuries underwater, scientists said it was the purity of the granite, the resilience of ancient carving. But others weren't so sure, because similar obelisks, left in dry sands, have crumbled. But this one, saturated with salt, frozen by ocean currents, survived. Intact, balanced, strangely too. And something else. The moment it was raised in London, compass readings nearby began to skew. Minor but measurable. Photographs taken at the base would often blur, as if something interfered with the light. And late-night workers in the area reported a low hum, like distant thunder, that never arrived. Coincidence? Perhaps. Or maybe the obelisk carried something with it. Not just mass, but memory. A frequency tuned to water, to tides, to something ancient beneath the sea. You see, not all stones are lifeless. Some hold resonance. Some remember shape and purpose. And some return changed. So what now? Cleopatra's Needle stands by the Thames. Ignored by most. Admired by few. But if you look closely, you'll see it doesn't belong. It leans ever so slightly. Not from damage, but from disinterest. As if it knows. It wasn't meant to be here. It wasn't meant to rise again. And yet it did. Maybe to remind us that the sea doesn't always take. Sometimes it returns. Returns with secrets, with scars, with stories not told in any language, but felt. So the next time you walk by the embankment and see the granite pillar lost in a sea of taxis, steel and smoke, listen, you might just hear the waves. Not crashing, but whispering, calling the obelisk back home. The pillar with no quarry. In the highlands of Ethiopia, where clouds cling low and winds speak in hushed tones, a field of obelisks stands tall against the sky. These aren't echoes of Egypt. They are something else entirely. Older in feel, different in style, and above all, impossible in origin. This is Aksum, a city that once ruled a vast kingdom, now remembered only in stone. Some of these monoliths stretch over 80 feet tall. They weigh hundreds of tons, carved from single pieces of granite. But the mystery isn't their size. It's where they came from. Because no quarry has ever been found. None. Geologists searched. Archaeologists dug. But no site exists. No mountain of granite nearby. No chisel marks on the land. No debris fields. It's as if these monoliths were summoned, not carved. Even stranger, the detailing is flawless. Windows, doors, false floors, all etched into the granite like a frozen skyscraper from another age. One stele, a fallen, had a carved false door 6 stories up. But who was it for? Was it symbolic? Ritualistic? Or functional? Because in Aksum's legends, these weren't markers. They were channels, gateways between realms. And perhaps that's why the quarry is missing. Because the source wasn't physical. It wasn't a hill of stone, but a place beyond this one. The place where stone responds to thought, where material obeys mind. Sound far-fetched? Then consider this. Some steels have electromagnetic properties. Compasses spin slightly when brought too close. Electronic equipment glitches. Animals grow uneasy. And then there's the base. Or rather, the lack of one. Some pillars appear to sit on nothing. No visible foundation. Just earth and granite and stillness. Engineers say they should have sunk. They haven't. Not in over 1,600 years. So how were they transported? How were they erected? The roads around Aksum are narrow, winding, steep. Even today, moving such massive stones would be a challenge. In ancient times, it should have been impossible. And yet, they stand, silent, or so we thought. In 2008, seismic instruments recorded strange pulses beneath the ground here. Rhythmic, consistent, almost like a beat. But there were no machines, no construction, just the earth and the pillars. It was as if the obelisks were communicating, not in words, but in frequency. And this idea isn't new. Ancient Aksumite texts speak of the stelae as anchored messengers, beacons, not for us, but for something watching, or remembering. When one of the tallest obelisks was taken to Rome by Mussolini in 1937, it was dismantled and shipped across continents. But the moment it was removed, locals said the rain stopped, crops failed, animals died. For 5 years. When the obelisk was returned in 2005, the weather changed again. Coincidence? Or connection? The elders of Aksum believe each pillar holds memory, that they're not monuments, but living archives, not of names, not of dates, but of events, frequencies, moments too big to be captured in text. And maybe that's why the quarry is missing. Because the quarry was never meant to be found. Because these stones aren't from the earth alone. They were shaped by something more, and left here not as decoration, but as signal, markers for those who knew how to read them. So the question isn't where they were carved, but why they were placed, in a forgotten field, at a forgotten altitude, by a forgotten people. The obelisks of Aksum don't point to heaven, they point inward, toward something beneath, or maybe within. And the pillar with no quarry? It's not a riddle to be solved. It's a whisper, a story without a voice. Presence that says, You're not supposed to find the source, because the source is not gone. It's just asleep. And the stone? It's still listening. The light that hit only once a year. Some monuments are built to last. Others are built to wait for one perfect moment. In the far south of Egypt, carved into a cliff overlooking the Nile, two temples sit half buried in sand. Grim, towering, silent. This is Abu Simbel. Not just a temple, a statement, a monument not only to Ramses II, but to something far older: light, time, and alignment. The temple's facade is lined with colossal statues, each standing nearly 70 feet tall, unblinking, unmoved, unfinished in some parts, as if the builders ran out of time. But the true wonder lies inside. Because twice a year, and only twice, the sun enters the temple. Not just the entrance, not just the main chamber, but all the way down, through a narrow corridor carved perfectly straight, to a room deep within the mountain. And there, the light touches 4 statues. One by one, on February 22nd and October 22nd, the sunlight creeps in, strikes the wall, and illuminates 3 of the 4 figures. Ramses himself, Ra the sun god, Ammonius, the god of creation. But the 4th? The god of the underworld, remains in shadow. Every time. Not by mistake, not by error, but by design. The angle is so precise, the calculations so perfect, that only modern laser tools could replicate the alignment. But this was done over 3,200 years ago. Without computers, without satellites, just stone, sky, and purpose. But what message was Ramses sending? Some say it was a cosmic clock, a solar calendar encoded in architecture. Others say those 2 dates were his birthday and coronation day, marking his divine rise. But there's another theory, one rarely spoken and never confirmed. Some believe the temple was not just a calendar, but a gate, a ritual, a sunbeam that, when touching those statues, activated something. Energy? Memory? Transmission? No one knows. But what we do know is this: the chamber reacts to the light. Even now, when the sun reaches the statues, the air feels warmer. Sound changes. Some say you can feel a pulse in the ground, faint, rhythmic, like a heartbeat buried in stone. When the Aswan High Dam threatened to drown Abu Simbel in the 1960s, the entire temple was moved, stone by stone, block by block. Over 1,000 pieces were dismantled and rebuilt on higher ground. A global effort, a miracle of engineering. But something changed. The alignment, by a fraction of a degree. Now the sun strikes the statues a day later than it used to. Just one day, and yet some claim the feeling is gone. That the chamber no longer breathes. That the resonance is off. That the moment has passed. Because even a perfect copy is still a copy. And maybe the original wasn't built to impress. It was built to connect. To something beyond the stars. Or deep within the stone. And that once the alignment was broken, even by an inch, the message was lost. But the question lingers: how did they do it? How did ancient engineers, without modern tools, calculate the solar path with such precision? Why choose that one spot, that one wall, that one angle? And how did they know that only light would reveal the truth? The temple doesn't answer. It waits. Twice a year, the people gather. Tourists, pilgrims, skeptics. They watch the sun rise. They watch it creep across the floor. And when the light hits the stone, there is silence. A moment when everyone, regardless of belief, feels not wonder, but timing. As if something just aligned. Even if only for a second. Maybe that's the point. Because in a world of shifting truths and forgotten stories, Abu Simbel reminds us of something simple. That even the sun, on 2 days a year, knows exactly where to stand. The tower that refused to fall. In a land where the earth shakes more often than it sleeps, where mountains groan and stones crumble without warning, there stands a tower that refuses to fall. Not once, not ever, for thousands of years. This is southern Peru, the Andes, a place known for its ancient builders and its unforgiving tectonic mood. And here, just beyond the horizon of what most maps forget, lies a weathered stone tower, part of the Chanquillo complex. Ancient, silent, and seemingly indestructible. It has no mortar, no steel reinforcements, just stacked stone, raw, uneven, hand-carved blocks. But it stands, Even after the earth beneath it has shifted, rolled, and roared with the fury of centuries, structures nearby have cracked. Others collapsed. Modern buildings have failed in less time. But not this one. So what makes it so strong? Some say it's the stone. Others, the placement. But no theory explains the full truth. Because when engineers examined it, they found something unexpected. Each stone was slightly irregular. Not perfect. Not square. And yet, they fit together like a puzzle. As if the builders knew that in a land of earthquakes, perfection is weakness. Flexibility is strength. The gaps between the stones, so small, act as shock absorbers, letting the tower sway, but never break. But that's not the real mystery. The real mystery is this. The tower shouldn't be here. Chanquillo is believed to be one of the oldest known astronomical complexes in the Americas. Its 13 towers on the nearby ridge, positioned to track the sun's annual movement, make up an ancient solar observatory dating back to the 4th century BC. But this tower? It doesn't align with the others. It doesn't track the solstice. It doesn't face the sunrise. It sits alone, at an angle, unconnected to any known ritual path. Some say it was part of a larger structure, lost to time, buried by quake or soil. Others believe it was built independently, a symbol, a warning, or a test. One researcher proposed something stranger, that the tower was not meant for the living. Its narrow interior, its awkward height, its lack of decoration, all suggest it wasn't made for comfort or display, but for containment, as if something inside needed to be kept in, or something outside needed to be kept away. Locals have legends about it. They say it hums at night, that the stones sweat when the moon is full, that no birds land on it, no animals nest within it. They say if you press your ear against the stone, you hear breathing, just beneath the surface. Skeptics laugh. Engineers shrug. But the legends persist. Because legends always do, when the land refuses to speak clearly. There's another theory, that the tower wasn't just built to survive earthquakes. It was built to harness them, to vibrate in tune, to amplify, to respond. A kind of ancient seismic tuning fork, listening to the deep rumbles of the earth, or sending its own pulse back down. When asked why anyone would build such a thing, an elder simply replied, "To remind the earth we are still here." Poetic? But maybe also accurate, because some structures are built for gods, others for men, some for the earth itself. The tower that refused to fall may never reveal its purpose, but in its silence, it teaches that resilience isn't about strength. It's about adaptation. That age isn't measured in years, but in what you've survived. And that even the most forgotten places, the ones not marked on tourist maps or history books, can hold the deepest truths. Maybe the tower was a temple, or a tomb, or a signal, or maybe it was just a message left in stone, for a future it knew would one day come asking. And when we ask, it responds not in words, but in presence, still standing, still waiting, as if to say, not yet, but soon. The secret they took when they removed it. Some secrets aren't buried, they're taken. In the heart of ancient Alexandria, near the shores where waves whispered through history, two obelisks once stood, tall, proud, identical. Known as Cleopatra's Needles, though they had nothing to do with Cleopatra herself, these twin monuments had stood for nearly 3,000 years, older than empires, witnesses to time. They were carved in Heliopolis, inscribed with the glories of Thutmose III, then moved to Alexandria centuries later, already aged, already cracked, and there they stood, for millennia, until they were split. One was taken to London, the other to New York, not just moved, uprooted, from the heat of the Egyptian sun, to the damp chill of the Thames, and the icy gusts of Manhattan. They traveled by ship, crated like artifacts, bolted into steel containers, weighing hundreds of tons, and yet deemed movable. What was left behind? A platform, and something else. Because when they removed the obelisk, strange things happened. Workers claimed the crate vibrated, not from the sea, but from the stone itself. They said the inscriptions shimmered under certain lights, that the hieroglyphs seemed unfinished, as if mid-sentence. Engineers dismissed it. Artifacts always have quirks. But something else was noted. Beneath the obelisk's base, a hollowed-out chamber, not documented, not expected. Inside, no gold, No scrolls. Just scorched stone. And dust that glowed faintly in the dark. It was sealed immediately. No explanation given. Some claimed it was just natural minerals. Others weren't so sure. And then the rumors began. That removing the obelisk disturbed something. That the needle was part of a larger system. One no longer complete. In New York, the obelisk was reassembled in Central Park. In London, near the embankment. But both show signs of accelerated wear. But other obelisks have endured far worse. And so, these twins crumble faster. Cracks widen. Hieroglyphs fade. As if disconnected from something they once needed. A circuit broken. A resonance lost. One curator noticed something strange in the records. That just before the removal, seismographs across Alexandria picked up a deep frequency hum. Consistent. Lasting nearly 7 minutes. Then, silence. Never recorded again. Coincidence? Or the moment something ancient went still? When asked why no further excavations were done beneath the obelisk's original site, officials cited instability, risk of collapse. But the real reason might be fear. Fear of finding what was supposed to stay sealed. Fear of discovering that these obelisks weren't just markers of power, but keys. Keys removed without understanding. And now, they sit in foreign cities, weathered by climates they weren't carved to endure. Tourists walk past, taking photos, rarely wondering why these monoliths feel off, silent, out of place, homesick. Because monuments, too, remember. They remember where they came from. They remember what they were part of. And when one is removed, the others, wherever they are, notice. There's a legend that the twin obelisks once served as a kind of transmitter. Each inscribed face aligned with a specific star. Each base positioned atop magnetic anomalies in the bedrock. Ancient engineers may have understood the subtle frequencies of the Earth. The obelisks weren't just stone. They were conductors, connectors. Removed from their circuit, they became mute. But somewhere, beneath Alexandria, the platform remains. The base that once supported the needle still hums faintly, only detectable by specialized instruments. Still waiting for the obelisk to return. Still trying to speak a message. Now incomplete. And maybe that's the greatest loss. Because in taking the obelisk, we didn't just remove history. We severed meaning. We broke a sentence mid-word. Interrupted a story mid-thought. And the rest? Still buried. Still whispering beneath the sand. Waiting for someone to notice that something is missing.